Hello and welcome to the YAWARRA International Dramaturgy panel with a focus on language. YAWARRA in Wiradjuri language means to take care and watch over. I'd like to acknowledge the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to the custodians of this country and to all First Australians, elders past and present. I'd like to introduce our panellists before we get started. So first of all, we have J Morrison, Andrea James. We have Kayla Newman, who will be taking some questions, should you have any. We have Tānemahuta Gray, who's coming in from Wellington in Aotearoa. And we have Dr. Lindsay Lachance from Turtle Island. And unfortunately, Lindsay couldn't make us because it's 3:30 in the morning there and the dark of winter. So Lindsay has generously sent to us a video addressing some of the questions we'll be asking tonight and some of the topics we'll be discussing. And then invite Tane to respond. And so I'm introducing Dr. Lindsay Lachance.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lindsay Lachance, and I am from an Algonquin, Anishinaabe, and mixed settler Canadian family. And I am speaking to you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Algonquin Anishinaabe on Turtle Island, or what is also known as occupied Canada. I acknowledge that this panel is happening on the Gadigal land of the YAWARRA Nation, and I am very grateful to be invited to be speaking with all of you today. So miigwech, thank you so much for having me. A little bit about myself. I work as a dramaturg, and I'm also an assistant professor in the Department of Theatre and Film at the University of British Columbia. I was the first artistic associate of Indigenous theatre at Canada's National Arts Centre, and I am also the director of the Animikie Creators Unit, which is run through Native Earth Performing Arts in Toronto, and that focuses on fostering and developing new play development by Indigenous artists and creators. So for myself, I live about 30 kilometers north of Canada's capital. So as you can see, this is an image of three beautiful rivers that intersect through Canada's capital. That's this little orange dot basically is the Parliament building. This image was created by my colleague, friend, and kin, Mari Brock-Rupe, and I'll speak more about her and her amazing work later. So I just wanted to show, to help self-locate, that this is, like I said, this orange dot is basically the Parliament building. And we have the Kitchissippi, we have the Gatineau Zibi, and we have the Rideau Zibi. So we have these three amazing bodies of water that have made it so that this territory has always been a place of meeting, a place of great exchanging of ideas, and very strong and beautiful waterways. So I just wanted to presence that and bring that into the landscape so we can look at the language of the rivers together today. So for me, like many people, starting by acknowledging the land is very intentional. And as I don't work specifically with Indigenous languages per se, I do work specifically with the land and the many languages and gestures that the land carries. So today I wanted to share a little bit about how I read the language of birch bark biting as dramaturgy. And so to give a bit of context to that, as I discuss in my PhD dissertation, which is called The Embodied Politics of Relational Indigenous Dramaturgies, I talk a little bit about land-based dramaturgies and how they may involve physically interacting with the land or waterways, how they may invoke a philosophical aspect when developing the process's framework, and or they may involve, for example, creation stories or languages that help to really build the ways that the pieces are created. So really focusing on process. So maybe looking at how the shapes or the flows of these rivers, what that evokes for us, and how that could actually be embedded in the values and the process and the system of the way that we collaborate and create together. So I define land-based dramaturgy as a theater-making process whereby individuals or collectives investigate and actually use cultural material, objects, family teachings, again, the flows of rivers, place as artistic collaborators. So including them into the process, giving them a voice, giving them language, giving them power and space in process. And for me, this is really seen as relational dramaturgy. And this is because we are looking to ourselves, we're including our stories, our languages, our bodies to help create the art piece, but also to inform the process, the way that this piece will be created. So I try to encourage ways that we can include our full selves to the work and not only carry out Western ways of making theater, which for me, when I mentioned that, is my theater training did have a lot of leave yourself at the door so that we could build yourself back up in a theatrically appropriate way. Whereas land-based dramaturgies and relational Indigenous dramaturgies are finding these ways that actually include all of our relations or our full selves to enter into studio. So for me to be able to bring in these rivers to presence, this way of working to presence the homelands in the space, in the studio while I'm working. So for me, birch bark biting as a dramaturgical framework is an art form and a language itself. And it becomes the principal source for new work development for me. A few years ago, I was introduced and taught to birch bark biting from, again, my friend, my colleague, my kin, Mari Brakupe, who is an Algonquin Anishinaabe artist and designer whose drawings and beadwork and designs are grounded in intergenerational Algonquin art and cultural teachings. And I am definitely not an expert birch bark biter, but as someone who does harvest my own materials and who participates in the art form, I can share a little bit about this approach, this way of working, and how it has influenced my theatrical process. So first of all, we have a beautiful birch tree here. And I have been taught that harvesting materials in the spring is the best time to do so because it's when the tree naturally begins to shed some of the bark and offers itself to animal relations for them to build their homes, or offers them for folks to build birch bark baskets or to do birch bark biting. Today it's hard. And so as the weather warms up, the tree naturally sheds itself, and it is a beautiful sight. And so as a way of me to demonstrate being in relationship with the tree and to demonstrate my gratitude and my respect towards my ancestor, the birch tree, I offer tobacco and I visit the tree before harvesting the bark. And in offering tobacco, I give thanks to the material that the tree has to offer. And I really think about, again, this ancestor while engaging in the practice of biting. A major aspect of birch bark biting is peeling the bark into thin layers. So, you know, you might get a piece off the tree that looks like this, and you can likely see that there are many layers here. And so it's really about peeling and finding a relationship and a groove and a vibe to working in relationship with this ancestor, with this material culture. So peeling the bark into thin layers, thin enough so that when we actually go to bring it to our mouth and we're actually engaging in biting, we're not hurting our teeth or our mouths. And the peeling can be extremely satisfying, but also really frustrating when she doesn't want to separate for you. So again, you're always in relationship and give and take and listening and responding to your artistic collaborator, just like you would in any other artistic creation. And so we can see that, you know, once you are peeling back and you have separated and you have a little square, you really fold half up from the bottom half to the bottom half. You fold the other half up from the bottom half to the bottom half till you have a triangle, and then you can begin your biting. You can control the designs that you make from using your fingers a little bit to guide what you're making. So practicing birch bark biting really is about being in relationship with the material and having good intentions, and just thinking about the shapes that you're trying to create with every tiny bite mark. And you'll be able to see the residue of that, the marks that are left behind the residue. So here's an example of the one that was made from me. So I have been able to use birch bark biting to really see a language of values, of land-based relationships that I can bring into the studio. And so one of the frameworks, the principles that I've been able to name from reading this language are layering, folding, deep listening, resurfacing, or emergence. And so these kind of act as the script composition, as acting training, as a rehearsal structure. When I go into studio, these principles: intention, layering, folding, deep listening, and resurfacing or emergence. And, when possible, I also invite artistic collaborators to participate with me to do a biting. So you can see that each piece has its own language, and each piece has been directly created by the artist and their relationship to the material. So I have to trust in the artistic process and presence good intentions and values throughout this work. And again, it really helps, these little marks really build a language that can be interpreted by their artistic creators. So for example, let's just say, I'm not sure, we don't have one here specifically, but let's just say, for example, someone sees a heart in their biting. So this gesture, this language means something specific to that artist. And we would then have a conversation of how that affects the world of the play. So if we see this heart, we might say, does this world need more love? Does this character lack love? Are they giving enough? Are they not receiving love? Why? How so? So do you see a sun rising? Like, what does that mean in the world of the play? Is it always sunny? Is it always dark? Really thinking about what we're taking from the reading and putting that into the play development process. So the biting really offers us a language from which we can further develop our own processes. And, maybe you'll receive something from the story or from the world of the play that you didn't expect from this biting. And reading the language of birch bark biting is really how I understand land-based and relational ways of creating, because it, again, allows for us to bring our whole selves into spaces when we look at something and we start asking the questions of what does this make us think about, and we're using languages that are not asking people, where's the climax, what's the denouement, what's the conflict here. We're really looking at people's specific interpretations based on their values, based on who they are, based on where they come from. So one person might see something and someone else might see something else. And again, I think that really helps us to create an organic and layered process that is truly dependent on relationships and what people see, what they read in the work that they're creating in relationship to the land. It is a constant reminder for me of how Anishinaabe carry the knowledge of our ancestors, homelands, and languages in our bodies, and that we can call upon them, we can presence them, we can be in relationship with them. In artistic spaces, we just have to find these ways to bring in, to merge our material culture, our languages, the gestures, the physical language into spaces when we're working. So lastly, here is another image of that Mari Brakape made specifically for my son, whose name is Zibi, which is river. And so this is the river that is in front of our house that I look at every day. River's namesake is his bloodline. And so that now moving forward in upcoming works, I'm going to be working with this cultural material, with this gesture, this physical language of the movements of the Gatineau Zibi in order to, again, find ways to have more conversations about creating, about story, so that it's based on the movements of the river as opposed to being based on a linear story arc. So for me, language and creating is always exciting. It's always shape-shifting. It's always relational, and we can find the patterns and the structures in what we've always known, what we've always seen, what's always been outside of our homes. And so, again, very grateful to be able to share some thoughts with everyone today, and Miigwech for the opportunity to make me feel full of joy and to reflect on my relationships with the birch trees and the rivers. And I'm going to go on a beautiful walk with Zibi after this. So Miigwech, and I send some good energy and great greetings to everyone. Thank you.
Miigwech. Ho ho. It's interesting with this provocation of dramaturgy in relation to language, the responses that we're going to get. And as you could see there, Lindsay's response to that provocation. And it's going to be enlightening, highlighting our own understanding of dramaturgy, which, you know, the word itself is a kind of European concept. And how we've taken that concept and made it relational, I guess, to country. And by that is language is country, and country is, language is country. And a way of working that's informed from country, to highlight our values. I'm going to throw to Tane now. Are you there, Tane?
Hi, yep.
Tānemahuta?
Hi, can you hear me, everyone?
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Hi. Tane, I sent you the provocation about working with language, and I know, you know, especially when we were over there recently at the Kimau Festival, we saw Hope's work
Yes.
that we were really excited by, and then we saw a reading of his work, which is entirely in Maori. I had no idea what was going on, but the experience itself was absolutely immersive in culture. So, yeah, I guess I'm interested in what your response is to this provocation.
Sure. To start, I'd just like to start with karakia and connection to everyone in the room and the space, and to bring Aotearoa rangatira language into this wonderful opportunity to be part of this panel. E tēnā te Māori ka noho ki runga ki ene mokopuna, ki runga ki tēnei whānau.
Can you hear me, Tane?
Yes, yep. Can you hear me all right?
I'm going to have to stop you.
Yeah.
Because we can't hear you.
Okay, got you.
And I don't want to miss anything that you say.
No, absolutely.
So we're just having a little technical issue and we're going to fix that.
Just so you guys know, his voice is going to the stream.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry. It's
so
just
was that going out
to
play or
live stream, but we just can't hear you in the space.
Okay, gotcha.
So
that'll be tricky for questions. But
that's tricky.
Well, mine, I'll flow through my conversation and then that'll be tricky for you for questions on that. But I'll probably keep flowing through this, I think. Yeah. well, it's here, timata no, I'll start again with our karakia connection and then move through from there. Hei tēnā te Māori ka noho ki runga ki ane mokapuna, ki runga ki tēnei whānau. Hei tēnā te Māori koia I runga, koia rangi nui I runga, koia rangi roa I raro,
There you
koia
go.
rangi ko tango, kia tiwha te pō, ki te ao, marama e. Tuturu o whiti whakamaua kia tina, haumi e hui e, tai ki e. A ena mana, ena reo, ena waka, ena maunga, e ngā mate. E ngai huri no te whenua nei. Tēnei te mihi ki ngā mana whenua o Aotearoa Nation I te whenua o Garigal. Ki ngā kaiwhakahare o Moogahlin me te Yellamundie Festival. Tēnei te mihi mai oha ki a koutou katoa. Huri no nai tahu me rangitāne, he whāngai no Waikato, ko Tānemahuta Gray tōku ingoa. Tēnei ahau te kaukura me te kaiarata ki toi o Takiroa Productions. I'd just like to first acknowledge what I was referencing to there first was the Māori or the life force of all those in this panel here and the lands that represent us all. The Māori, the life force from Turtle Island through to Aotearoa, Australia, and their ancestors, past, present, and future. They've walked those lands and will continue to walk them. And then also to Aotearoa and our ancestors and tupuna within Aotearoa. Also want to acknowledge the Yellamundie Festival and the Moogahlin whānau for this opportunity to share in this dramaturgical corridor. To give you my base of where I come from, my Māori links through my mum in Ngaitahu, which is the biggest tribe in the South Island, Rangitane, which is the tribe just about a couple of hours north of Wellington, our capital city in the North Island, and Waikato, where mum was adopted underneath the kingitanga, the Māori king and queen at the time, where she spent her early years there. I'm the artistic director and CEO for Takiroa Productions, which is unofficially New Zealand's national Māori theatre production company, which has been running for 38 years. And Takiroa, what we do is we develop for children and youth through our Te Reo Māori season, a play that we tour through to schools all around the motu, all around Aotearoa, New Zealand, with the show fully in Te Reo Māori or the Māori language. Takiroa also do main stage productions based on Māori kaupapa. These shows tend to be in English or can be dance works as well. And we tour those nationally around New Zealand and also looking in the future, depending on COVID, to return back to international touring as well. I'm here to speak today about our Te Reo Māori season, which has been running for 26 years now. So we've had a Te Reo Māori show every single year created and touring around schools for the past 26 years, which has been a wonderful achievement for Aotearoa and our support of revitalising Māori language being utilised in an everyday activity for our students and communities around Aotearoa. The Te Reo Māori season shows, actually, just to give you a concept of it, it's a 45 to 50 minute production, fully held in the Māori language, that we tour to both mainstream primary and secondary schools and kura kaupapa schools. And kura kaupapa schools are schools in New Zealand which are fully taught science, maths, English, all taught in Te Reo Māori, plus other subjects as well, and have a Māori worldview as how their the students are taught. So we provide our shows for those schools as well. This show tours for 13 weeks per year over the first and third school terms, presenting 2 shows per day in different schools, where we pack and perform, do a Q&A and pack down, and then move to another school to do the 2 shows in the school day cycle. And we present 10 shows a week, moving from region to region around Aotearoa, and making sure that we can reach out to schools that wouldn't normally have a chance for a Māori theatre experience or Te Reo Māori theatre experience for their students. However, not all students on the schools that we attend have students who understand the Māori language. And so we have to develop and direct our works, incorporating a lot of physical theatre, strongly realised characters and lots of songs or waiata in our productions to aid in the narrative engagement and fun entertainment for our student audiences to keep them engaged in our shows. And hoping we've got 2 excerpts of a show just to give you kind of a glimpse of how these shows work for our youth. So I'll give you just a bit of a background of these 2 works before that clip's played. The 2 show excerpts in this upcoming video will show how our work is presented to our tamariki, our young children. The first one is Te Kuia me te Punga Were Were, the Old Lady and the Spider. And the second one is Ngā Manu Rōreka, the Sweet Singing Songbirds. I'll give a bit of context to the first one. Te Kuia me te Punga Were Were is based off one of New Zealand's favourite children's stories called The Old Lady and the Spider in English. This is by one of our first female Māori authors, Patricia Grace, and our great illustrators, Robin Kahukiwa. The show was first produced by Tākiro Productions and Capital E in partnership, and we spent 3 years devising and developing the production and adding a fuller backstory from the original book. And we contracted Jamie McCaskill, who the listeners may know. He's working on co-writer of Hide the Dog at the moment, Hanaya Takuri, alongside Nathan Maynard from Tasmania. And they worked, Jamie McCaskill worked with our devising team to develop a more fleshed out story that included the spider and the old lady magically transporting to the spider world as they look to save the spider kingdom from the ensuing human real estate development infringing on their world. A very environmental story in a very humorous way to try and tackle that issue of us taking over nature. However, in this clip, the spider's younger brother, Pukino, has other ideas as he desires to be known as the chosen savior for his, as one known to save his fellow Spider King from destruction, and not his brother Pupai, who has been selected as the chosen one to go into the human world to find the secrets as to how to save the Spider Kingdom. The second clip, Ngā Manu Rōreka, by one of our great writers and poets, Apinana Taylor, is about 2 students, Rāmai and Takimana, who are always in trouble with their teachers in school. Their ancestors can see the trouble that their descendants are in and emerge from the carved meeting house into physical modern day form to guide Rāmai and Takimana to follow their singing passions and enter the local singing competition with a prize of $5,000 up for grabs. So hopefully our video might be ready and to enjoy a taste of how we stage our Te Reo Māori seasons in a show where, especially presented to students who have no understanding of Te Reo Māori, how do we engage them in our shows. So hoping that Stephen, you might be able to play that video for us. So I'll just keep going through a bit of the quarter of the dramaturgical side of things, but just quickly, the role of Tākiro Productions is to showcase works that present unique career pathway opportunities for students of Te Reo Māori. One of our mandates is to show these students that there is performance opportunities available for actors who have the ability to speak and understand Te Reo Māori. And but the big challenge for our works is how do we get schools with non-speaking Māori language students to at least understand the main narrative drive of the play. So we select and develop shows that have big, bold characters with strong costuming styles for the audiences to easily recognise them. And from there, the acting form is exaggerated in style, dipping into physical theatre and strong caricature. And our directors work to help all the staging and blocking of the actors aid in and for the audiences to comprehend the show's narrative, especially our younger audiences. In addition, our set and sound designers work cohesively to use sound effects and clear staging to help immerse our audiences in the world and the worlds that we want to transport them to. But dramaturgically, writing plays in Te Reo Māori requires appropriate tikanga or customs and cultural integrity to be followed. When developing a story that is based on legends or stories from a particular tribe or iwi, as we call them, one needs to ideally, firstly, get a writer from that iwi to lead the project, or at least get permission from the iwi representatives that they are happy for you to share their story to the wider community. This process can take months of negotiations, and in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we don't have an abundance of Māori playwrights in each region around the country. So it's very common for Māori from other iwi or tribes to be the playwright for stories that aren't from their genealogical background. So we're trying to support and develop more talent nationwide to change this picture, but to be honest, it is a slow growth process. The second challenge we have in Te Reo Māori dramaturgy is that we don't have enough Māori playwrights. We've got an abundance of solid, talented Māori playwrights, but not enough who have the skill set to write directly in Te Reo Māori. Therefore, we are many times in a situation where a Māori playwright writes the play in English, and then we get a translator to translate the work. The challenge with this process is that you lose a cultural perspective and authenticity when the script is a translated one. And you have to also have a very gifted translator to reframe the script so that it has a Māori worldview embedded through the Māori language into the script. Both the clips you saw were plays where Jamin Caskell and Apirana Taylor wrote the plays in English and had the scripts translated by Hohepa Waitoa and Materoa Hainga, respectively. However, Hohepa Waitoa, as mentioned before by Liza-Mare Syron, did write a powerful play called He Kura e Hona Ana, which was written in Te Reo Māori originally, and the nako came from that worldview of essence. And it was done with such a high quality level of language proficiency and competency. It was our Takirua's first main stage Te Reo Māori production that we produced in 37 years of our history. So it's taken that long for our company to take a main stage work and put them on the main stage stages.
37 years.
37 years after 26 years of doing the schools tour. That's how long that's taken us to manage that. The depth of the script was developed over 3 years, and with the late Nancy Brunning guiding Hohepa's playwriting craft and dramaturgical guidance, to tell a story that wove seamlessly between the modern and traditional worlds about the origin of Pounamu, or what we call green. Just back to a bit more framing of our reason for our Te Reo Māori season shows and why we do them at Takirua, being our legacy work that we do annually every year. Our Te Reo Māori school productions, however, our shows, set and costumes all have to fit in one van or two vans, or one van and one mini truck, and perform in either large school halls or in 4 by 4 metre square performance spaces in school classrooms. The shows can be built to be able to pack in within 30 to 45 minutes and out in 15 to 30 minutes. So it's quite a creative challenge for our design team, but it allows us to reach schools in the most rural areas in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Places that can take 3-4 hours to drive through to and would not get any plays whatsoever in their annual calendar. And even during COVID-19 in 2020, we were able to present to 85 schools over 75 performances that showed Ngā Mani Rōreka last year, which was about 60% of what we achieved in 2019 when we presented Te Koe Me Te Punga Were Were. And that was the biggest outreach we've ever had in the 26 years, where we performed to 148 schools, over 130 performances, and about 19,500 students. So the language journey of more mainstream schools wanting to take up and experience these shows in Te Reo Māori, even though many of their students, if not all of them, don't even have or have a very limited capacity of Te Reo Māori. There's just a great sense of change that's slowly happening in New Zealand, especially in the last 3 to 4 years. And finally, the importance to us of presenting a production in Te Reo Māori is triple-fold. Firstly, the language is still in a revitalisation phase in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and this show adds another outlet for schools to have Te Reo Māori experiences offered to them. Secondly, we would be lucky to have 2 or 3 productions fully in Te Reo Māori out of dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of children's theatre productions and main stage theatre productions that are done in English nationwide. So Takirua commits to provide at least one annual Kaupapa Māori, Te Reo Māori show for our students, to provide a Te Reo Māori performance experience for them and our communities. And finally, just the kind of context of where Te Reo Māori is sitting in Aotearoa, New Zealand, which I think is still quite strong when you look at Indigenous languages nationally around the world. It's and the challenge of trying to revitalise our languages. But to get some context and numbers, about 1 in 5 Māori in New Zealand can speak Māori. And of all New Zealanders, only 4% of New Zealanders can speak Te Reo Māori. So again, these shows are another way for us as an opportunity to support those school teachers who are right in the barracks at that time, really, doing in the trenches with our tamariki, trying to revitalise our reo and provide another opportunity for them to showcase that, yes, Te Reo Māori does have a place in schools, and we're trying to push further to have it in main stage theatres and around the world, around New Zealand, sorry, Aotearoa, beyond the kapahaka festivals, which are traditional dance and performance festivals, which are highly engaged and well received nationwide. But it's trying to grow that capacity further into contemporary theatre. Kia ora te koutou, and ngā mihi anō kia koutou mō tēnei wā ki te koro kia koutou, and pai ana mō tēnei wā ki te whakarongo ki ngā pātai kei te whakautu ki a koutou katoa. Thanks for the opportunity to share that perspective of what's happening in Aotearoa with Takirua Productions at the moment, and they really looking forward to any questions and answering those as well for the processes and going deep in the processes that we do with building those plays.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great.
Beautiful. Thanks, brother.
I'm just trying to pick up on a couple of things that, whoa, bouncing.
Might turn the mute
From the speakers. So what I'm the big thing for me is the status of language and its national status. For example, I guess Te Reo Māori has status as a national language in Aotearoa. I understand that in Turtle Island, when Trudeau took over, they announced that their national languages were French and English, and left out First Nations languages completely. So they're still off the table, I guess. And here in Australia, of course, with Terra Nullius, we're just getting over that, like it didn't exist. So, our context is kind of, in a way, recovery as much as it is revitalisation. So it's only, I guess, recently that in the last, say, 10, 15 years that we've seen plays here in Australia that are completely or, a majority of it in language. Most of our early plays had spatterings of language words, which we all completely picked up and took as our own. I remember walking around after 7 Stages of Grieving, and the word susu, everyone took up susu, and everyone was talking about their susus down here. Yeah, exactly. And it took us a long while to kind of reclaim our own words in that way. But what these plays can do is they change language and they become present in spaces where they weren't necessarily historically. And this idea of translation, which is a dramaturgical practice, adaptations, translations, contextualising, researching, is something that is kind of taking up a bit of traction here as well. And I want to hand over to Carl Morrison, who's just worked on Hecate, which and
We've got our year anniversary of the first production around about now. I think we were rehearsing for it last year for the Perth Festival, and I want to acknowledge first our visitors and Tāne and Lindsay, who shared lots of beautiful insights and really got me thinking about a lot of different levels of dramaturgical practice. And I really like the land-based dramaturgy and the idea that that we are the land, you know, our kinship and our totemic systems are embedded and interweaved into the country and into the land. So when you're talking about land-based or land-based dramaturgy, then you're talking about us as the spirits that connect to the land, and language being an extension of us and the language of country. You know, it's I'm my family are from the Midwest and from Noongar country. My mum and my maternal grandmother and my maternal links go back to the Midwest, to the freshwater country that way, the mighty Murchison River and Buddy Meyer and Wadjuri culture and language groups. But I would say that I'm culturally Noongar. And it's quite a privilege to say that. I don't know if anybody before me has really kind of claimed that idea in a contemporary sense, that culturally Noongar, because we were so close to being extinguished as a language and as a cultural and philosophical paradigm. Less than 500 people speak Noongar language, and that's, you know, in all measures of the United Nations, we're critically endangered, our language. So when you're talking about the access to revitalisation, or we've had to really look at it from a different angle. We've had to acknowledge that there's so much trauma in our community and so much trauma in our families. There's so much kind of guarded and protective mindsets around language that certain families and regions will say, you know, speak Noongar like this, and so you want to kind of protect that, and it brings up a lot of issues and a lot of anger and a lot of sadness and a lot of just deep sadness, and brings up a beautiful point that Lindsay brought up, is that deep listening to oneself, and to bring your full self into a dramaturgical process. What does that actually mean for when you want to reclaim that language, when you want to reclaim and revitalize it? Because we had so many people who were so distrusting of how language was implemented and used, and growing up, every time you'd hear your language, you know the way that the colony has talked about our languages and our philosophies and our cultural paradigms, that they were uneducated, or they were less than. They weren't as highly philosophical, or that we weren't as highly academic because we didn't use the same concepts, and that really drives, you know, a lack of esteem for self and your language within the whole community. I remember growing up, it wasn't until we 10 years ago, we were working on Shakespeare's sonnets in Noongar language to perform at the Globe, that I really started to call myself Noongar, that I really had the strength to own that, because I couldn't claim anything that wasn't culturally significant or connected to language and dance and story, because unfortunately what it meant to be a Noongar in a contemporary sense was police, grog, alcohol, jail, funerals, you know, going to see family on dialysis. Is that our contemporary culture? Like what is it to be a Noongar in a contemporary sense? And a lot of it had to do with the worst parts of what the colony has given us. So how do we re-vitalize, or how do we reshape what to be Noongar is, and to be able to sit here and say I'm culturally Noongar? What does that actually mean? It means that I've got an understanding of my language, and I've got an understanding of the philosophies that totally decolonize the colonies and the nation's grip on my own self-esteem. And so in talking about where the context for where the want for Noongar language to be, you know, revitalized, that was where it sat in the Southwest. And when I was young, I had the absolute honor and privilege to take part in old ceremonies, initiation ceremonies up in the Northwest, up in the Pilbara, as part of my cousin brothers coming to manhood ceremonies, and just seeing how that wasn't something different from themselves. It was a normative part of their religion and their culture and the esteem with which that is. Once all the white fellas were gone and we were out in the bush and it was just all of us mob, and it was just all the songs and the dances, and I still have some of those songs, running around in my head, and I'm sure some of them put us to sleep as kids because we weren't allowed to sit up for the rest of the ceremony. But coming down south into living in Noongar country, we would do our dances as kids at NAIDOC week, like once a year. You might be able to get some damper and some kangaroo, and you might be able to do some dance, get some kangaroo dances and stuff like that. And I had come from a place where those dances were really significant. So I got into them with gusto. And so I was missing, and I really wanted this connection back to language. But how do we do that as contemporary Noongar? We can't really, and disagree with me, mob, and I know some of my mob will back home, and that's where we're at. We're still disagreeing on how to implement our language, because the songs that were sung by my great-great-grandfathers aren't the songs that I can sing now. And so trying to connect to that language and trying to connect to that philosophical paradigm, I'm not those people. I don't have that knowledge to sing those verses to country. And
so why Shakespeare sonnets?
I'm slowly getting around there. I know. You know me. So we wanted to create a new version of our language and create a contemporary connection to it that builds esteem, not only in our Noongar people, but in all the rest of Western Australia. So you got 300 people sitting in that audience, half of them Gadias and Moogahlin and Nyidiyang and Wadjulas, and we got lots of names for them, mob.
Yep.
And the rest of them were Noongars who didn't really speak our language. Maybe 1 or 2, 3 people a night could speak our language. But everybody walked away with an esteem of language and esteem of Shakespeare, because I love Shakespeare too, because that's my culture. As a Western theatre maker, I'm entitled to the canon of Western art. And Western Australians are entitled to Noongar language, and mob will disagree with me because of the protectionist kind of attitudes around language. So I really wanted to create something and be a part of the recreation of something that built a strong sense of esteem right in here. So when the fire in your belly has got a different fuel when you're wanting to create more. And I've got some of the lines from our Shakespeare.
Before you get to that, darling, can I just ask you, how did that process start? Like, what were the things you were thinking about how am I going to get a team of people around me? Like, who are the people I'm needing to kind of bring into this process to make sure that this is done in a kind of valued way?
Well, I had the dream and I didn't know how I was going to do it, and I went to a couple of different language people, and the way that they talked about how the language was situated and how we can't do this and can't do that, I didn't want to go through with the fear. And so it wasn't until I was chatting with the amazing Kylie Bracknell and just kind of going, I'm having trouble with this, can't find these languages. She's like, brother, I can do it. And I'm still talking along, going, I don't know about this. And she's just quietly, brother, I can do it. And still talking along, and she's like, brother, I can do it. And so once that realization really hit, and this was for the sonnets in 2011 to go to the 2012 Cultural Olympiad, we had somebody that understands theatre, that loves the language. I think she loves Shakespeare now. I don't know. I'm trying to still get her encouraged so we can do Othello eventually. But to create a living language based on original and existing text. And Shakespeare ain't going nowhere in humanity. It's going to be around forever. I mean, it's even on Star Trek, So it's definitely going to be in the future, because that always tells us about the future.
Don't get me started on Star Trek.
These conference calls, that's Star Trek for you. But there's that idea that we want to create this living language, and that's connected to now. Yeah. And the latest project that we've been working on that was Kylie's dream. She loves kung fu movies, and I'm like, kung fu, Bruce Lee, sister, really? Pop culture. So we've been working on Fists of Fury by coming from the 70s and 80s Chinatown, Bruce Lee, and that's been adapted and redubbed, and we redubbed all of that in Noongar. So we want to create these new ideas of what language is, because we can't replicate the people that lost the language.
Yeah.
And you can't really heal from in the same mindset and the same situation that created the hurt.
Yeah.
So we want to heal in a different way. And things like the Kung Fu movies and Carla Hart's doing, you know, short films with lots of language in it. And Ian Wilkes back home is creating works that walk through, you know, places of trauma, but with language. And Uncle Barry Maguire and Clint Bracknell are doing these soundscapes with all this Noongar language. And I think we just needed to start bringing it into the contemporary, because we can't be those people anymore. We can't replicate who our ancestors were, because we can't visit those sites and sing those songs anymore. What we have to do is create a new esteem and a new love for Noongar language as the vibrant, philosophical, academic language that it really is. Because if we don't do that, it's going to sit in a shelf in a museum and it's going to die. And not, you know, I don't want that to happen.
I understand that, you know, using these kind of genre platforms is going to make it relevant to new audiences. I absolutely get that. But are we losing kind of meaning and some of those deep meanings of language terms and phrases and words through adaptations?
Well,
it's just a question.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we're not, you know, looking at, well, you know, I love Robbie Williams, but we're not going to be adapting that kind of level of English, but we're going back to some of the root languages. So Kylie worked with Cantonese and the highly, deeply philosophical language that is. So we bypassed the English, going straight from Cantonese to Noongar.
Wow.
So there's similar concepts that we can have the strength of that philosophy retold through the strength of ours. And I think Shakespeare's got a wealth and a depth of philosophy that's, you know, the more you peel it away as actors and
so
directors.
Are you playing with those kind of double meanings or triple meanings in Noongar language whilst you're unpacking those in the Shakespeare sonnet?
Oh, I think so. I think so. I mean, like Kylie Farmer and Kylie Bracknell and Yibi Young, Roma Winmar.
That whole first opening monologue in Noongar.
It was that whole, you know, that's usually cut from most male versions of Macbeth, and so when we were looking at the dramaturgy of that, we were looking at, you know, what is country trying to say? I like as a male brain, I'm kind of going, I think country needs to burn, and we are country, and we got to burn what we think is ourselves and what we idealize as this traditional values of Noongar culture, because we don't have a Noongar culture, because culture is what you do every day, and until we're speaking it every day, it's not a part of our contemporary culture. And so, though those double meanings, but also all those beautiful Shakespearean jokes and double meanings, like it was beautiful to be able to have a moment that only the Shakespeare fans knew, and then moments that only the Noongar fans knew, and you're just hearing all these different laughs throughout, and that's Western Australian. That's what Australian theatre I feel we could be heading to. But we weren't representing an extinct, dead species of animal on country. No, we were representing nobility as it stands on country with our own language. And our mob got to see an hour and a half of us being so strong and proud and owning the language and speaking it as kings and lords and rulers of our own domain, you know, and that
giving it authority,
giving it esteem, giving it authority, giving it love, giving it validity, you know. That's what our mob walked out. And you still see the tears, you know, I can still see the tears on the faces of all our elders after the show, because they hadn't dreamed that was going to be happening for them again. And nobody could see the visions that I had for all of this. But I think we're starting to see now the strength of what contemporizing our language and our aesthetic and our philosophy, whatever that is, whatever that needs to be for my grandchildren, God willing I ever have any, is what's for them is whatever they want, because the language should be theirs.
It's interesting because I think through the theatre platform, some of the first words we heard on stage were from Jack Davis, which was Noongar.
Yeah.
You know, it was spoken, you know, here and across the country.
Yeah, and same as like word gammon, like that's not Noongar word, but we all say that, you know, and Gungees and, you know, and paying respects to...
Moogahlin from Queensland. And so, we're getting a lot of influences that we're taking... Hey? Yeah, we're getting a lot of influences that we're kind of, you know, taking on and owning in a way, even though it's not necessarily the language of this country.
But it wasn't the colonizers' language. It was something else. So we gravitated to that. We would hold each other's language if we could.
Yeah. And historically, there was probably a lot of sharing of languages going on.
Yeah, that's well. I mean, Delara Williams was working on the Lookout as part of the Yellamundie Festival. Start talking. She goes, wait. What was that word again? I'm like, Mara for hand. She goes, Mara, we all, like a lot of us say Mara for hand and Jenna for foot. And so with that understanding that you can communicate by Mara, you can hold, you can throw, and the feet you can travel. Like there's a lot of way we can communicate, and the rest we can work out. And one of the languages that's not, that we haven't talked about yet, is the physical language that's unspoken. How your eyes move and the lips move and things like that, and so much unspoken
Which
stuff.
is what Tane was referring to.
Yeah,
you know, using of physical actions.
That's right.
And
That's
song,
right.
like song, song being used in the rehearsal process is a very strong catalyst for language learning.
Oh, just head, shoulders, knees, and toes.
Yes.
Like that was the first song that we really had to learn to sing again.
Can you sing it?
Yeah. Kat kumbat gurnich jen, burnich jen, burnich jen, kat kungat burnich jen, ngalak marak ba min. And so that's the song that's taught to Noongar students and to everybody in Western Australia. But the process to getting us to being second language speakers, like I would say that I'm maybe middle primary school, year 3, year 4 level Noongar speaker.
Yeah.
I'd love to be, a wise academic level speaker. But the process to do that was we didn't even touch Macbeth. We didn't even touch the script for like a year in development. We just sat down and had to learn our language. And people were chucking the scripts and walking out, and I gave up a number of times on the process and broke down and cried. And one of the actors talks about, that deep anger in his guts, like, why didn't my family fight for that language? But your family did. How come that family? Why have we got to go to your family? And, why didn't my mob hold on to it? And you kind of go, brother, because that wasn't safe. My grandmother was beaten if she spoke our language. So me and my cousin sister J Morrison, we're the first generation to take that back, because there's no fear of violence for us, but the violence is inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I lost a thought then, but
I do that to you all the time, Lindsay.
You do. That's all right. I should listen more and not be thinking about the next question.
It's deep listening, sister, as Lindsay was talking about. And once you got that language in your guts and listening to that language deep down through your feet, we'd go outside and just stand and listen to the birds, and then we have to name all the birds, and we'd be walking through and learning about what shade and shadow is, just all the most basic concepts, which are highly philosophical concepts. And
I will come back to the question. It was around...
You want a question?
And it's something that I think we should all talk about, is that kind of creating spaces for those feelings to come up and to be talked through around the shame of speaking language in our country.
And shame of getting it wrong. Like if you don't get it perfect, it's so hard. And I've made so many mistakes, and fellas have drilled me, and aunties have drilled me for getting the word wrong. Like I'm talking about somebody, and I was mentioning they are sick, but I said they are dead. And but I want to keep using the language. If I stop now, and if I get scared
You're not
now,
gonna get it right.
It's never going to happen. But we've got to push through all of those pain barriers. But they're so hard because they're so deeply entrenched. It's traumatic.
It's sort of become sacred, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So we just have to bring it back into the everyday and try and encourage people not to be so careful with it. And obviously it's understandable that we are, but we still need to be robust with it and flexible with it.
On that, I want to just allow you, Andrea, to introduce yourself and kind of lean you towards 2 projects that you've worked on in the last, I don't know how long. One of them is your play Yannigi Yannigi, which was probably one of the first plays that I saw with a language title.
Yeah.
And then a recent project that happened here at Yellamundie, which went through a lot of that conflict, I think, around right pronunciation of words. It also, some of the challenges in that space were around language speakers from 2 parts of a very large country, Gamilaroi, and how terms were to be spoken publicly, which caused a little bit of conflict in the rehearsal process, and probably ask you to see if you could talk about that a little bit. So I might hand it over to you, Andrea.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm Andrea James. I'm a Yorta Gunai woman, living and working here in Gadigal country and sometimes Darkinjung country. Just been thinking a lot overnight, about language. I mean, I think like all of us, especially as artists, there's not particularly a particularly rational or logical path. You know what I mean? You just follow your own passions and, you know, things present themselves and you go down a path, you know, it hasn't really been that logical. But I do remember when I was studying at Victoria College of the Arts, so I'm a trained theatre maker, and, you know, sometimes I'm a director, sometimes I'm a dramaturg, sometimes, very rarely I'm an actor, and sometimes I'm a producer, you know, whatever box they want to put us in. But and we can't be boxed, really. You know, so storyteller, I think, is the best way to describe what it is that we do, you know. Yeah, and our but we do have a common desire, which is to tell our stories, you know, and to be, you know, to become a conduit for your country, you know, and to speak truth, you know, sometimes in conflict, you know, and that's sort of what we're engaged in doing. But I'll never forget, I went to Ningaloo, bless Ningaloo, her one-woman show at the Malthouse, and it still gives me goosebumps, you know, but she said, "You are nothing without your language." And I left that performance and I cried for 4 hours non-stop. It was such a profound provocation that she gave to us, you know, and, you know, she came over and, you know, full language and talking about her experience of being in Alaska and this black desert woman in the snow. And anyway, that provocation affected me profoundly. And I said, I'm not nothing without my language, you know. I'm most influenced by Yorta language because that was the country that I grew up on. You know, I was thrown in a river before I could walk, so I learnt to swim before I could walk in freshwater country. You know, and, you know, like many of our languages here, they're remnant languages, you know. So I just, I think that from that point on, and again, it wasn't a conscious thing, but I think that really, that struck a chord with me. And really, you know, look, in terms of Yanagai, I would never sought out to be a playwright, you know, or a director for that matter. But while I was studying at the VCA, the native title case came out, and, you know, we lost our right to land rights because they said that our connection to country was the tide of history swept away our connection to country. And so that set me on a path to go, well, actually, no, that's not the case. And I'm going to gather a whole, you know, all Yorta mob, and we're going to show you our connection to country. And the obvious way to do that was through the language. Wow. And it was a remnant language as well, you know, so, and we were very fortunate because we had some Yorta people, Ani Lois Peeler, Sharon Atkins, and another Yorta woman whose name I forget, who worked with a linguist. And as part of the Yorta land claim process was that we collected every possible story from every family everywhere, and it's all written now in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of volumes. Awesome. And every single word. And, you know, the thing is that some of the words have been recorded by linguists, you know, and you'll have like often 10 different pronunciations, you know, and there are arguments about how you say one, you know, your Lapna mob will say this word means this and no, you pronounce it like this, and on and on and on and on it goes, you know, but it's exciting. And so all of that was recorded. So really, I wanted to make that a living, breathing entity, and so, you know, we used that remnant language, and it was really challenging because we don't have all the words left to describe things. But so in a way, as a playwright, you kind of almost have to be like haiku, like a poetry. Like, okay, so there's nothing for whirlwind, but if I put that word with that word, it'll mean the same thing. Do you know? Yeah. And you know, we're survivors. And we're adaptable, and so that's kind of what we set about doing, you know. And you know, look, even if that show never ever went to performance, in terms of what happened in that rehearsal room, so we got a young Yorta man, nephew to Ani Hillis Maris, and he was a speaker, and so he came into the room, and we learnt how to speak again. And it was a bit like learning to walk again, you know. And same ways, you know, we had to not be precious about it, make mistakes, get pronunciations wrong. You know, to this very day, I often wonder, would that word have been spoken quicker? Are we being too slow? You know, that kind of thing. Are we putting the emphasis in the right place? All of that. But the beauty of performance is that when you do it in action, you kind of know you're going to get it right because the action speaks to it. But also to trust that the landscape the rhythm of the country will show you how to speak, you know. So in terms of how fast our river flows, and mind you, it flows faster now because it's been dammed upstream. But anyway, you know, all of that stuff. So yeah. And so what was beautiful about that process, I'll never forget, Tony Briggs just looked at me and goes, "Cuz, we're speaking our language." You know, and I thought, like, if I die tomorrow, my job here is done. And we don't even need an audience for that, you know, because that was really, really special, you know. And then we took it up home, and, you know, we went up to Aotearoa country, went to Echuca, and in this big cinema where, you know, where we never used to be able to go to, bless, and kids were fucking running around everywhere. And I'm like, oh my God, no one's listening. Oh, they hate it, you know. And then we all came out in the foyer, and those kids started talking to each other in Aotearoa language, you know. And how quick they picked it up, and also because it was in action, you know, so they knew that Munera meant thunder, you know, and they knew that Yanagai went go away, and all of that, and they picked it up really, really quick, you know. And there's exciting things going up on country now, you know. There's a little card pack. Kids are really learning all of that language, and it's just, you know, it's really exciting. You know, we've got Dr. Lou Bennett, who's now, you know, a qualified linguist, and she's shaken it up big time.
Yes,
you
through
know,
song.
Through song, but also, you know, there's all this linguistic, scientific, you know, you've got to say this, and your tongue's got to do this, and that's the symbol for na-na-na, you know. And she's like, you know what, actually it's just this, and my authority is my elders, you know. And so she's shaken it up big time there and doing really exciting stuff through song, as is Briggs, you know, through his music, and doing that through the medium of hip hop, and, you know, connecting to younger audiences in that way as well. So, you know, there's really, really exciting things, and it's really, really hopeful.
It's also healing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's healing. You know, and yeah, like you're saying, Cole, it's sad, you know, because you're connecting to, and you, when you speak your language, you know, you're also like fundamentally aware of what's lost, you know, and what's not there when you're dealing.
The way it was lost.
Yes, when you're dealing with a remnant language. So, you know, yeah, but the more you speak it, the more it, you know, and it's a vibration. It's an extremely powerful act to speak your language, because you are connecting to your country. Your whole body vibrates with it, no matter where you are. And like every play I've written, and this again is not, there's nothing rational about it, but every single play I've written is I sing up country, and it has to start from that place, you know, and then the language sort of comes from that too. So, yeah.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Like when, like in all of these examples, song has been used as a way to kind of connect in a very deep way, but also, as you say, for bringing in the spirits to talk, allow them to hear the language again, to speak, to be present.
Absolutely. It's an incredibly powerful force, and all of us will know, you know, when we come into a space, you know, where we need to smoke it, and how strong and powerful that is, you know, in terms of asking permission whoever's country you're on, but then bringing in your own spirit into that place. It's a really powerful force, you know. And when you have to go and talk to the venues about turning the smoke alarms off, and, you know, and them not having to worry about getting smoke in the curtains and but for us it's really, really important, and slowly and surely that's becoming more and more accepted, but, you know, got to chip
I want
away
to
at
just
it.
firstly touch on, like, Tane, we have here, you know, in actor training, I guess, I'm just coming back to that because that was something I was deeply invested in for a very long time. And I understand during Hecate as well that there was a voice coach, but it was a non-Noongar voice coach.
Yeah, from the Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts.
Yes, who came in to teach placement of sound and vowels and consonants of Noongar for the actors.
Yes. We got a lot of value out of that. But she had to really watch what we were doing and try and learn some of the language. And you can just see up at the back going... and trying to work out how our...
Where the placement was in the back of the palate.
Yeah, because my jaw was getting sore in places that I didn't realise it was, because I had to know the biomechanics of our language is different to English.
Yes.
You know, it says in Hamlin, using it trippingly on the tongue.
No, that's not how we speak.
That's not how we speak.
No.
Half of it is in the back, and it's all sort of connected to different muscles, and even just relearning that was another process, was a whole other process. We had to warm up differently, and we had to sing different songs to get into the vibe, to get your body going, and I forgot all about that, but we had to get a whole new biomechanics of how our mouths work to do Noongar properly.
Yeah, like a retraining our voice, which has been trained in English, to speak in language.
Yes, and then project when is happening, and it's kind of going, how do you project that? And we're not trained to do that, so we had to rethink a lot of that.
Well, we weren't speaking to very large audiences when our language was developed.
How all of our audience could hear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Nice. Thank you so much for some very deep insights into this process of bringing language back and live through the theatre context. I want to see if there's any questions. We got some questions.
Yes. So just like to share that Monique Mohika is watching along with us.
Who?
Monique Mohika from Native Earth. Yeah. And Sandy Greenwood also joins us saying, thank you for sharing your cultural knowledge and dramaturgical expertise. I'm very excited about this panel. And Eva Grace is Melanie from Yuriakin.
Hi, Eva.
Hello.
Hey,
hello, Eva.
This is directed towards Tāne. Is there a big difference in the dramaturgical process of supporting a writer like Hoepe to write in Te Reo Māori and a writer like Jamie writing in English to be translated?
Really good question. I think it comes down to what we're trying to do at Tākirua now is to try and develop writers who write in Te Reo Māori as their first and primarily, just so that, because New Zealand's and Aotearoa is in an interesting position where we have a lot of speakers of Te Reo Māori who hold strong traditional knowledge in our traditional performance forms, and our performing arts forms is kapa haka, which is all Te Reo Māori songs, haka, action songs, poi. You'll probably know the traditional forms of our songs relating to our history of each iwi and each and that whole dance form, performance form, is where our language is really accelerating to such level. Our challenge is trying to get and engage with those who are strong in the reo and come into the world of contemporary theatre so they can tell the same stories, similar stories as what they're doing with kapa haka, but with a whole different lens and a different depth that you can go into with contemporary theatre or contemporary dance, or manners and ways with which we can express our stories in different ways. And that journey is, Hohepa is a very good example as one who's come from that strong kapa haka world, has learned his reo to such a high level and degree, and then he's been guided through the process of, he's done 3 plays now fully in Te Reo Māori, and growing his craft and ability as a writer. So between ourselves, Tākirua, Tawata Productions and Hāpai Productions, Nancy Brunning, Hone Koka, Media George, have supported Hohepa so that now he's actually now funded as he's got annual funding for a year for his own company, which is amazing. That's happened in 4 years, 4 or 5 years. So that's just so exceptional when you're seeing that change happen, and it helped build the development of especially those artists in Christchurch, because there's not a lot of Māori artists in Christchurch. So he's a real key po down there for us. For someone like Jamie, and like myself as well, he's on his journey to grow his reo, and that especially happened even stronger in the last few months. So what I'm quite excited to see is if that grows to an ability or level that he can actually write scripts fully in Te Reo Māori, because we had the same challenge as what Kyle was talking about, where 30, 40 years ago, 83, I think was the last time I've heard, where our grandparents and parents were disciplined in school, beaten up at school for speaking Māori. So our great-grandparents didn't want to have that happening to their kids, our parents, and so they didn't teach them the Māori language. So within a generational shift, our narrative story was the majority of our reo was about to actually die out and become extinct. And that they were looking at the 50s, 60s and 70s, and it wasn't until the 80s that after land marches in the late 70s, led by Whenekupa, and then the language regeneration that was led by other great tupuna of ours to try and reclaim the language. Did we have in 1982 a very successful change where a kohanga reo movement was established, and that's preschool or kindergarten, but fully in te reo Māori. And once those kids who started there in 82 became 5, then they said, well, we want to keep it going, so let's do it for school. So that's where Kura Kaupapa got established, and the government funded those entities so that we now have dozens and dozens of schools. So if you want to choose for your children to go and learn fully in te reo Māori, then you've got that option available to you. Then went through to college, what we call wharekura, and now whare wānanga. So university institutions have it as well. So we've got it now right through the whole gamut. As those kids in 82 now, they're 38 now, and their reo is in a way, like if you look at their parents who couldn't speak te reo, they speak fully te reo, and they're at the level of where their great-grandparents were. So it's taken 2 generations to revitalize that reo. Our challenge for probably our actors is that we have some actors who have gone through that process of kura kaupapa, so they're already fluent in te reo, so they're fine when we go into the acting room to bring the reo nice and strong. But for those actors who don't have the reo and are wanting to come and do a te reo Māori season to grow their reo, which is a great way to do that, that they really have to take that step up, as what Kyle was saying, into the room and grow that reo, because they're going to perform to students whose reo now it's their first language back in New Zealand. So that's quite a pressure in itself as well. So it's an interesting situation for them. But that's why I've got, I mean, for people like Scotty Cotter, Jason Takare, actors who wanted to do our reo season, in terms of their experience as actors, they were, their main stage performers who used to the big stages and that, but to come and do the schools tour and doing 100, 130 shows in te reo really brings your pronunciation and your usability of the reo much stronger, and it adds it to your kete of knowledge. So I've got a big mihi to those who have utilised the te reo Māori season to grow their reo capability in a new framework of which Aotearoa is in. And I think that the lucky thing for us in New Zealand is we have 7 dialects of a language which is very similar for each other. The change isn't that much, where I think in Australia there's these 400 or 500 languages of difference, completely different languages from each other. I think the same in Canada as well. So the revitalisation of language in New Zealand is a much easier job when you have one reo with different dialects off the reo, but not too transformational. So funds and support can be channeled to that one, where you're trying to bring 450 languages to life. I don't know how you do that. That comes down to each community really holding on to that value and building
one at a time.
One at a time. That's exactly right. And there's the challenge. And the other thing's interesting, I know that Kōrero you said about the pressure of saying the language well, or the the old language, the way we speak that to the modern day language. We've got something we call te kauwairunga, te kauwairaro. So the top jawbone, te kauwairunga, and te kauwairaro, the lower jawbone. So the top jawbone is that very tapu sacred language that our priests and our tohunga would speak, and that reo of karakia, chants, and knowledge wouldn't only be gifted to certain amounts of people who could hold that kind of knowledge, because the level, intensity, and the sacredness of the language is such that only ones who had that gift would speak within te kauwairunga. And then te kauwairaro was more, even though still sacred in its language, it was more open for more of the community to be able to connect to that language. So we're still lucky that we've been able to uphold to those very sacred parts of our language, and then find the more modern day utilization of communication of our language, which has been really key in keeping the language alive. I think if we got to a place where you were so restricted and not able to be able to speak the reo, that's the thing that constricts it and makes it die. And I found that personally myself when I learned te reo Māori, had it to a certain stage, but then I went and learned Spanish overseas, and that freed me up because there wasn't this constriction of what words you could say. You were just trying to do your best and learn it and grow within there. When I came back to Māori, it felt for me, my reo, when I came back to New Zealand and started growing that further, it grew another step because I had that other experience in another language and realized, oh wow, we do have an opportunity here where if you don't speak it, if you don't just use it as a everyday communication, you're going to lose it. Let's use it as much as we can, because we're in an environment still where your confidence will go straight back to English first. And so how do we turn flip that switch so we go let's try as much as we can, even if it's still trying to find our Māori, we're just trying to the best we can to get our reo across stronger. Just to finish off, I'll just answer your question a bit more, Eva Grace, in terms of like say Jamie and Māori playwrights who are growing their capacity in Te Reo Māori, but maybe not have that. We have a balance. We realise that our narrative in New Zealand is that had 40 years ago our parents and grandparents hadn't been beaten up in Aotearoa, then all of us Māori would be speaking Māori today and be able to write in Māori and do all those elements, and that would be the norm. It's because of that narrative history that we're going to support whatever playwright we can, wherever they are on the journey, so that we can grow that capacity, but with the design intention that they grow their capacity so that they can do it in two reo, in two languages. And I just think, I look to that in Holland. I think everyone in Holland speaks 3 languages, most speak 4, quite a lot speak 5. We can do 2 languages in Aotearoa, and we have, well, we're 3 languages that are official: Māori, sign language, and English are our 3 official languages in New Zealand. So that whole having a treaty and that process has certainly aided Aotearoa New Zealand and Māori to be able to actually fight and stake a claim for more support. And I think the other big difference is we're 16-70% of the population. So that's quite a voting block, where I think it's 2 to 3% in Australia, and even less, I think, in Canada for First Nations, 1 to 2%, I believe. So it's when you don't have that numbers, that voting block to make change, it's that much, it is very difficult to get the wider mainstream being able to provide the resources and provide the support required to make that growth happen. So, but all our aspiration now to Aotearoa is that we can really keep pushing the mantle and showing what is possible. And each year we put a Te Reo Māori season play together and get it up for our students. It's another year where hopefully another few thousand students who'd never experienced it before go, oh, wow, I understood that show and I understood where it came, and that was in Te Reo Māori and it wasn't so scary. That maybe this isn't such a scary step for me to journey in myself. And if that opens the light for them, then we're winning the battle. So long battle, but let's see if we can get some good wins out of it.
Cool. Yeah. We've got about 10 minutes left. We'll see what other questions there are. Okay. Yeah.
Just on that Tainui Tukuwahu, he said, damn language, insight of different muscles needing to warm up for our languages was so cool to hear as well, which is really amazing. And one final question from Pippa Bailey. Thanks so much for offering digital access. It's so good to hear these speakers and think about dramaturgy from a First Nations perspective. I'd like to pick up on Dr. Syron's point about dramaturgy being a European practice. In Australia, the dominant theatrical cultural influence is English, and the dramaturgical relationship between theatrical form, content, history, and context is not always well understood, even in non-Indigenous work. So, looking forward, I'd love your views on how First Nations development of dramaturgy relating to language and country might lead a new way of thinking about dramaturgical cultural context for all Australian works. Sorry if this is a mouthful.
No, I get that. Yes, hey, I am Pippa. In agreement, as I'm sure everyone else is. Thank you, Pippa. Mm-hmm. Do we have another question? No? Okay. All right, cool.
I want to touch on what
is there anything? I was going to ask, is there anything that's been brewing that's kind of come up through the conversation that anyone is
I think
wanting
that
to talk
at some
about?
point, each country, each town, each region will have its own idea of that connected to how country works and how their language works. And at some point, we won't even call it dramaturgy. The fact that we still call it dramaturgy suggests that we are doing that.
Well, that's why we called it YAWARRA. Sorry, I'm a bit dry in the mouth.
While we're here in Yellamundie, we're not doing dramaturgy.
But from now on, we're going to call it YAWARRA.
So that's and
YAWARRA.
and how do we, and so like that's decolonizing that space by taking the power of those words away from our craft and to create new paradigms for what exists from putting the words together to make sure that because at the crew that we called Hecate, our crew, we based it on the Shakespearean players, but to play in Noongar is Wabin, and we Wabin Gura, we're the players, we're the family. So automatically we've got a new idea of what the players or the theatre makers are.
Yeah.
And so, the next steps would be to reclaim our language, to reclaim our process of creation through our language lens, and the word dramaturgy will just fall away to the side, I think, at some point.
Yes.
Maybe?
Yeah,
Andrea.
I think we sort of got our feet in both camps in a sort of a way, and it's going to be a continuing kind of challenge. And I think, our biggest enemy, apart from living and working in colonised spaces, is time. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're trying to, claw back generations of sort of loss, and often you get thrown into, oh, hello, here's 2 weeks, to write a play.
Which is what happened with Donna McLaren's
in
play.
language, in Gomeroi.
And none of us really knew what we were doing. We just thought...
and we're not on country, and I'm a Yorta person, and already, so we're trying to translate amongst each other, let alone for non-Aboriginal audiences.
Do you remember the name of the play?
I don't off the top of my head. Yeah, Donna McLaren, bless. Yeah, but, look, it's a challenge. And so really the ideal scenario for that would have been, obviously a Gomeroi dramaturg or a YAWARRA to work on that project. Do we have any yet? Not yet, but we've got to skill people up. But, the ideal process for that was for me to go and live on country there for a period of time and connect with elders.
It's reframing that development process, absolutely.
And in a way, a dramaturg is a kind of a bit like an elder or somebody who comes in with an authority, and so Donna's auntie who came into that process was really, really important as well, so...
McGrady? Yeah. Colleen.
Yeah,
I mean, it's all about the process, because dramaturg for that was Kate Mulvaney, who's a non-Indigenous, but I call her Nyalu because she's born in Geraldton. So,
but maybe her job was, bringing the kind of Noongar dramaturgy into a theatrical contemporary space.
Well, she knew about Shakespeare dramaturgy, and Kylie knows about Noongar language, so the collaboration between that was...
in-between space. But I also understand that there were 2 years of workshops, language workshops.
Like a year and a half before we even touched the script.
And
we had to learn language. We had to be competent speakers. Kylie didn't want to... Carla Julbakara and didn't even want us up there unless we felt it and we could speak from the gut. So there were days when we had hour-long sessions where we just weren't allowed to speak English, and so that brought up a whole lot of trauma, and that put us all on notice. And then we had to go out and try and get coffee and buy lunch and stuff like that, all in Noongar, and that created, we had to start making words for coffee and this kind of sandwich, and what are we going to call avocado? I don't know, but we work it out as we go.
And isn't it right? It's the process we do with ourselves, then we have to get ready to share it.
Yes, that's the hard part, isn't it?
We have to build it in here before we can,
I'm thinking, though, that we're all talking about a single language in a rehearsal space. And what I started thinking about was the Shadow King, which had a diversity of different languages from a particular area in one show. And I think that's the only one I've ever seen of its kind in Australia. And I don't know if there's still people around, that we can go and talk to about that process, because I know...
But Kamahi was really instrumental in that process, and, so that director, that non-Aboriginal director, was very lucky. But I don't think Kamahi got credited in the way that he should have been with that project.
Yes.
And, I think he should have been co-writer or co-director, or there was a very important partnership that wasn't reflected in the acknowledgements, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, and dramaturgy is, I guess, another version of what's the dream. What is the overall dream? What is the big picture? What is the vision that we've got for that? And if that's not connected to country, and if that's Michael Cantor doesn't have that connection to country to be able to dream Aboriginal plays, what they would have made at that time with all of these different languages, and Kamahi got a good command of, and Uncle Tommy with their language, but it really felt like a European dream for a bunch of languages that are dying out. I no wonder why I felt so awkward in that audience.
Okay. There was another question, but again it dropped out just at the end there.
But I guess I just wanted to say too, that ultimately there's a universality to story, and we all sense there's a shape to it that we all feel, regardless of what background we come from. And I think we can trust in that a little bit, which allows us to share our stories with each other, that we have a gut feeling about what a shape of that sort of is. we just have different ways of telling it. You know.
I guess also, as you were talking about, Tāne, it's our responsibility to start training in this way, to bring these different approaches to YAWARRA, I guess, because some of us get brought in on plays or productions to give advice, and where, you know, the titles that we're given are Indigenous dramaturg or cultural dramaturg, that kind of thing. Cultural consultant. Yes.
Cultural consultant was the word from
or
the
cultural
audience.
Consultant, sorry. So it's I think it's our turn to kind of reclaim our titles and how we want to, what practice we want to bring to those roles, and in some way, as you say, start to share this this way of working that's unique to us as First Peoples of our countries.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we've brought in a role, Pautikanga Mātauranga Māori, a role within Tākirua, which is a cultural, in a way, cultural dramaturgical expert, who actually just, his main focus is on the cultural integrity and cultural safety of each project that we do, and guides our team and the contractors we work with to provide, to make sure the appropriate safe ways of holding these stories is done appropriately. And I think that's the more we are able to bring strong knowledge-based elders into our mix, and will allow us to be safe in the journeying into these stories, which, especially if they're old tupuna or ancestral lineage or atua, in our word for gods, and that they have a modi and a level of tapu sacredness which you want to make sure that the performers themselves will be safe when they play this role. So that's becoming more and more important in our way of telling our stories that way.
Thank you. We're going to have to wrap this up. I know there's so much more to say, but thank you for tuning in. And if you've got any pressing questions that come up in the next whatever, send them through to Moogahlin, and we'll try and get our panelists to answer that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tāne. Thank you, Carl.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Moogahlin.
Yellamundie.
Turn him up there.